Good morning.
Good morning, Don. How
Okay,
are you?
very well, thank you.
Good.
Okay, let's see. Um, okay, we're at the top of 20A. About a third, maybe a quarter of the way down. About 20 lines down, second word on the line, Tana Rabbana. Rabbi stop. Kiem kefias hamita shlosha yom kodem l'regel. So this idea of kefias hamita, turning over the bed, it's no longer practiced anywhere. I've never heard of it being practiced, but it's a sign of mourning. It's like I don't know, turn over the bed. You're demonstrating like something is out of place, or you're not in comfort, or something like that. So person who goes into mourning is supposed to, or what was supposed to, do this overturning of the bed. If he did that for 3 days before the holiday, in other words, you have the burial and then you practice this bed turning over for 3 days, and you don't have to continue after the holiday, because the holiday canceled the shiva. But there has to be at least 3 days, according to Rabbi Eliezer, of doing it before it can be canceled by the holiday. Other rabbis say no. It's like if you started this practice even an hour before Yantiv, then and Yantiv comes along, the holiday comes along and cancels the shiva, and you don't have to continue going over the bed after the holiday. Amar Rabbi Elazar says, "Hein hein divrei Shammai, hein hein divrei Hillel." This argument is the same as the argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So Beis Shammai Yomim Shloshi Yomim. Beis Shammai took the position of Rabbi Elazar that it has to be effective for at least 3 days before it can be canceled. Beis Hillel Beis Hillel said no, even if you observe it for 1 day, the holiday then cancels it. Rabbi Yochanan said, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Some said Rabbi Yochanan said it to Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Huna. Afilu yom echad, afilu shachas. He held it 1 day. If you just did it for an hour, then it can be canceled by the holiday. Rabbi Amar halacha katan bidan diyamar shlosha. But Rabbi said we practice like Rabbi Lazar, who says it's 3 days. Ravina equal to Surah Depras. Ravina came to Surah on the Euphrates. Amar le Rabbi Chaviva Ravina. Rabbi Chaviva said to him, Filchasamai, how do we practice? Amar le Fil Yamachav Afil Shachas. You just have to practice it for a day or for an hour, and that can be counted. Yasi Rabbi Chia bar Abba Rabbi Ami Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha Akila de Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar. So these rabbis, Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Ami, and Rabbi Yitzchak, were sitting on the porch of Rabbi Yitzchak. Nafak Milsa Mibenayo, and they were discussing the following. Shiva. So we saw yesterday the source for the 30 days, the Shloshim, is by comparison to the Nazir, that his period of non-haircutting is 30 days, and by analogy, the mourner also has a 30-day period. What about the 7-day period of mourning? Says, I will turn your holidays into mourning. How long is a holiday? 7 days, right? Pesach is 7 days, Sukkot 7 days, even Shavuot, we saw yesterday, is only 1 day, but the period during which we celebrate it with the Carbon Chagiga, and we're about halfway down on 28. The period which you can celebrate with the Chagiga is 7 days. So by analogy, Avelus is also 7 days, because this verse links holidays to mourning. What about Shavuos, which is 1 day? I answered this question already. There you have an that's used for Reish Lakish. Says Reish Lakish, we shouldn't read it in the Siyah, which said in the name of Yehuda, or Yehuda the prince. How do you know that if you have a distant hearing, meaning that you heard about the death of a close relative much later on, right? He died, the news doesn't travel so fast. and it's like months later, and then you hear about it. So then your mourning period is only one day. Where's that from? He says, the same verse, I will turn your holidays into mourning. And Shavuos, which is called a holiday, even though it's only one day. Um, so, so we have a different derivation for the different holidays, right? The Pesach and Sukkot holidays are by analogy to the regular case of 7 days, and Shavuos is compared to the Shmor Rechoka, the later, hearing the news late. Then which holiday do you derive the mourning period from? From Shavuos, which is
Dov, your sound is going in and out.
okay. Um, yeah, I'm hearing some. I guess still right. I'm going to dial in again and see if that helps.
Okay.
Is this any better?
I think so.
Okay, let me know if it cuts out again. I'll go get my headset. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Okay. I got it.
Tana Rabban, the rabbi's talk. Shmuel Korov Nohegas Shiva Shloshim. So we're going to discuss this late news of a death. So there is, if you hear about the death late, there's still a shiva and a shloshim period. But shmur choka, shmur krova. That means like that's like you hear the news in a reasonable time, near to when it happened. But shmur choka and hagas al yom echad. If you hear it later, then it's only one day. How do you define what's late? How late is it? Krova b'tel shloshim yom. If you hear about it within the first 30 days of the death, that's considered current. And if you hear about it after 30 days, that's considered delayed. Rabbi Akiva's opinion. The rabbis say, no, it doesn't matter when you hear about it. It could be years later. You still have a regular Shiva and Shloshim period. Rabbi said, whenever you find an individual rules leniently, and the many, there are many with the opposing opinion that is strict. Halacha karabim, then you follow the strict majority opinion. Except for this one, Shafal Pishar Yekiva even though Rabbi Yekiva is an individual arguing against everybody else, and he's the one that's lenient, Machmir, and the other rabbis are stricter. Halacha Rabbi Yekiva. Here we say the law follows Rabbi Yekiva. Because of this principle that we saw before of Shmuel, that whenever you have a dispute about mourning, you follow the more lenient opinion. And
when my relatives heard that their relatives had been killed in the Holocaust, they sat, that's what I heard, is that they sat Shiva. Obviously it happened like a couple of years before, when they were murdered. I think they sat Shiva for like 2 days or something like that. I don't know exactly. Mm-hmm. This sounds like, maybe they should have sat a whole Shiva, or maybe 1 day or something, or.
Yeah, those are the two options here. 1 day, which sounds like the way we rule, or but I think it's generally the general practice is a shortened one, and right. I don't details of 1 day or 2 days. This seems to be like it should be 1 day. Maybe there was like more than one person that they were. Maybe they observed 1 day for each or something.
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was just 1 day. Yeah, maybe it was.
I'm very pleased to say that I have no personal familiarity with the laws of mourning. So
you shouldn't know from it. Yeah.
Yeah. Rav Chanina Asyale Shmua Davua Mi Bechazai. Rav Chanina had a late report of his father's death from Bechazai, a place. Also, coming to Rav Chisda, he went to Rav Chisda to ask him what to do. Amalei Shmur Chokai. And I said one day for a delayed for late news. Rav Nassim had a late report of mother's death from Bechazai. I guess Bechazai they didn't have good communications lines. Also, he came to Rava. He said, "That's what we already know this. Only in one day." So he asked. Bamedvarim Amorim, another brisa says, when does this late hearing rule apply? Only in the case of the five of the 7 close relatives. So who do you sit shiva for? Your mother, your father, your brother, sister, brother or sister. I said already. What, son and daughter, and one more wife.
Spouse.
So the parents are different. So for the other 5, that the rule is just the one day for a late news. But for your parents, that there's no exemption, there's no leniency for hearing it late. Whenever you hear it, it's the full 7 and 30 days of mourning. Rava says, no, that's just an individual opinion. That's not the prevailing opinion of Velocity. I don't hold like that. Detanya, where's that individual opinion? From this brisa. The father of Rav Tzadok died. You only heard about it 3 years later. He asked Elisha ben Avuya, the famous apostate who started out as a leading rabbi. He was the teacher of Rav Meir. So he came and asked him and the elders that were with him what he should do. V'yamru, they said, and probably this was before he apostated. V'yamru, and they said, Nahog shiva shloshim. You should practice the full 7 and 30 days because of your parents. Because when Rabbi Achia's son died, shiva shloshim. He also sat for the full thing. So that would accord with the view of the rabbis in our Mishnah, that there is no such thing there's no exception for late news. Any is that so? Rav Barachua de Rabbi Chia, but Rav, the nephew of Rabbi Chia, Dehu Bar Achse de Rabbi Chia, who is also the nephew 2 ways, through Rabbi Chia's brother and through Rabbi Chia's sister. Clearly, these were half brothers and half sisters, right? So the Rabbi Chia had a half brother and he had a half sister from two different sides of his family, and they married, and their son was Rav. So he was a nephew to Rabbi Chia twice over. So when Rav went to Palestine, Amalei Abakayim, Rav Chia says, "Is your father?" Amalei Imakayamis. He says, like, my mother is alive. He didn't want to say anything about his father. Amalei Imakayamis. Actually, he didn't say that. He said you should. He asked. He kind of flipped the question back at him, saying, "Is my mother alive?" Imakayamis. So he says, okay, so tell me, is your mother alive? Amalei Abakayim. So Rav says, is my father alive? So in other words, he's evading the question. Amalei L'Shamei, because he didn't want to verbally report this death. It's unpleasant news and whatever. He didn't want to say it explicitly. Amalei L'Shamei. So he said, Rav Chia said to his attendant, I take off my shoes and follow me to bring my towel or whatever, my fresh clothes, to the bathhouse. So Shmamina Tzlas. So there's 3 things we see from here. Shmamina Avel also Nilas Sandal. You see that a mourner can't wear shoes. That's why he said, take off my shoes. Shmamina Shmur Chokein Hegasol Yom Echad. And you see from this that the practice of Avelus for a late news is only one day, which is why he was able to go to the bathhouse, right? He has to take off his shoes right now because he has to start mourning right now. By the time he gets to the bathhouse, like he'll have said, okay, it's done. I've mourned for an hour, and now it's done. That's why he could
go to the bathhouse when you're in mourning.
Right. You can't go when you're mourning, but between the time that he left his house and got to the bathhouse, he would have observed already the full period of mourning for late news. So you have to take off the shoes right away because you have to do something, right? And he's wearing shoes, got to take off the shoes. By the time he gets to the bathhouse, it's over. And Shemami no Mixasayim Kakulo. And you also see that part of the day is considered the whole day. So that's how we practice now, right? But if as long as he practiced did the morning practices for part of the day, then that can be considered the full day and he's finished.
I'm going to tell you a story in my family. Okay. Somebody did not want to sit Shiva for somebody.
Yeah.
Okay. So they told me, I'm not going to, don't tell me, when this person dies, because he was very sick. Okay. After 30 days.
Huh.
Okay.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I thought it was very weird, but I what am I supposed to do? So anyway, he was informed after 30 days, so he wouldn't, and he was observant. So in other words, this person was trying to follow halacha, but not sit shiva for somebody who was obligated to sit shiva for.
Wow.
You would think that he has, a moral and ethical obligation to sit shiva, which should override his personal feelings of the person.
You can't argue with this. You can't argue with this, right? You would think, but you can't convince that person, right, that they should do it if it's clear that they say they don't want to.
Well,
yeah.
I guess yes. I can't argue with that either.
I mean, it was very inappropriate, to say the least, but families are
families are complicated matters, to say the least. Right?
What can I say? My family has its issues, so that's.
Well, you're not alone, Hannah. You're not alone, I assure you.
That one was a weird one, though. That one wasn't expecting that one, but.
Yeah.
But they were relying on this leniency. But apparently, according to our Gemara, he should have sat Shiva for a day. About it after 30 days.
Part of a day, anyway. Yeah.
Maybe he did.
Maybe he did.
I don't know. Actually.
I mean, you wouldn't. What do you take off your shoes and sit on the floor, for an hour, and not take a bath for an hour, right?
Right. Maybe that's what he did. Yeah. He must have probably done that because it sounds like that's what you're.
Why have bothered with the whole ruse if he wasn't going to do it at all, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, so this this whole thing contradicts the idea that like why did he do the whole 7 days for his son's death, right? Rabbi Chia. So the answer is Rabbi Chia Luchud. Rabbi Chia Luchud. They had different practices. It's like what we know already that there's different opinions. So he's following one opinion and somebody else following another opinion. I'm Rabbi Yossi Baravim. Rabbi Yossi says, Shama Shmua Krova Beregel. What if you receive news of a recent death on the holiday? But so you don't start the Shiva until after the holiday. By the time the holiday ends, it's more than 30 days, right? So you heard about it on day 28. Okay, it's Chol Moed. It's during the middle of Pesach, right? By the time Pesach ends, it's day 32. Okay, so is this considered? And that's when you should start your Shiva, right? So which way do you go with is it considered a recent or recent news?
Gotcha. Yeah.
So consider it day 32. Like you count the days, you keep counting the days to get to day 30, and by the time you're ready to start your Shiva, it's delayed news. Tani Rav Ada Demin Kesari Kamid Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Ada from Kesari taught before Rabbi Yochanan. Shamash Shema Krova b'Shabbos. What about Shabbos? If you hear about it on the 30th day, which is Shabbos, well, Masai Shabbos Nasis Rechoka. So you don't start the Shiva practices until after Shabbos, which is now day 31, right? So Eno Noeg El Yom Echad. It's the same rule. It's only one day they have to do. Korea or no Korea? What about if you have a delayed report? Do you tear your clothing or not? As I'm sure you know, there's a practice to tear one's clothing when you hear of the death of a close relative. Often it's done at the cemetery or at the eulogy or whatever. But what happens if it's after 30 days? Rav Mani Amar, in a Korea, Rav Mani says no clothes tearing after 30 days. Rav Chanina Amar Korea. Rav Chanina says there is. I won't let Rav Chanina. Rav Mani says, Bishlama l'didida mina Korea. Okay, so I hold that there's no clothes tearing. Haina delo ika vela shiva. So it's like in line with the whole principle that there isn't a shiva going on here, so it's linked to the tearing of clothes. But you who say you do tear your clothes, how is it that you tear your clothes without 7 days of shiva? It doesn't make sense, right? They seem to be linked. Like if you're going to tear your clothes, it's something that seems to require 7 days of mourning. So, well, where do you get that from? Velo? Is that not are they really separate? Are they really not separate things? Are they really part of the same practice? So Hatane, Isi Avuad Rabbi Zera, Verin La Achud Rabbi Zera, Isi, who is either the father or the brother of Zera, Kamei Rabbi Zera, taught Rabbi Zera himself. Misha Ein Lo Chaluk L'Kro, if you don't have a shirt to tear, I guess that means it's not your clothes. Like, let's say you don't have your own, you're not wearing your own clothing, you're wearing a rented tux, so you can't tear somebody else's clothes. The Nizamin Lo B'Toch Shiva, Korea, and then you get your clothes back from the laundry during the shiva, and you put on your shirt. Then you should do kriya. Then you should tear it. Achar shiva and Korea, but if you don't get your laundry back until after the shiva, then you don't have to tear your clothes anymore. So it does seem to be linked to the shiva, right? If shiva's over, there's no more clothes tearing, right? According to this source.
That's when you knew about it.
Yeah.
Close to tear. That's different than you just found out about it.
Right, but the point that they're making is that that practice of tearing is linked to the shiva, to the 7 days of mourning, right? If you've it
depends how you understand what the purpose of kriya is. Is it like an expression of, if it's an expression of like your grief, then you should tear it whenever you find out, whether it's a year later or 2 days.
Well, the Gemara is kind of going to go in your direction, but actually the opposite. It's going to claim that that it's the immediate grief that triggers both shiva and tearing. So if you find out later, you really don't have to sit shiva and don't have to tear. Here, let's see what he says. Ani Reb Zera Basreis, Reb Zera answered, "B'medvarim amurim b'chamisha misay mitzvah." That only counts for the 5 other relatives. For your parents, you have to tear kriya. You have to tear your garments even like after the shiva is completed. Okay, if you get your clothes then. So it looks like there is a case where you do kriya without the shiva, right? The shiva is over, you get your clothes back, and now you do the tearing for your parents, right? But not for the other 5.
If you find out that one of your parents died after.
No, this is the case where you didn't have any clothes of your own.
Oh, okay.
So you couldn't do the kriya because you can't tear somebody else's clothes.
Okay, but what if you find out after 30 days?
You're right. So we're trying to make that analogy, right? So from the borrowed clothes case, it seems like that there is no linkage between shiva and tearing of the clothes, because here you have a case where you tear your clothes after the shiva is completed, right? And you still do it. You still tear your clothes. So you should say the same thing about the shmua about finding out late, right?
Yeah.
But the answer is Kitanya Hilchvod Aviyimo. You know why that only applies to your parents? Not because of mourning practices. The mourning practices, indeed, we say after the shiva is completed, there's no tearing of clothes. They can't be separated. So why do you tear your clothes? Because that is just a sign of respect, of respect for your parents, right? It's not a grief. It's not the grief aspect is done because the shiva is completed, but you still have, as a mark of respect to your parents, you still should tear your shirt, and that doesn't to the other relatives, because you don't have a mitzvah to respect your wife, your brother, your sister in the same way as your parents.
Yeah, but if you find out after 30 days,
Yeah.
that God forbid, one of your parents dies, that the grief is immediate because you didn't know.
Right, but the grief is presumably ameliorated by the fact that it happened a long time ago. That's why you
I
don't
don't
sit.
think so. You're just finding out.
Yeah,
How
I
is that
understand.
ameliorated?
But the idea that you don't sit a full shift. So why do you think that you don't do a full shift? You find out late. I agree with you. The grief should be kind of the same, and yet there's some kind of
It's a technical thing. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I'm not sure actually. Yeah, I mean, if you assume that your relative was alive and then you find out, I mean, maybe it's different. Like if they're missing or something, you don't know, it's just a fake, and then they find the remains or something like that. That's kind of different. You kind of like, but if you just find out, like in my relative's case, they probably knew that they didn't survive the war or something. So, maybe it wasn't, I mean, it was awful, but it wasn't a complete shock. But if it's, I don't know, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I can see it both ways. And I would venture to say that, every case is different, right?
Right.
Like you say, it depends what the situation was. Did you suspect? Did you know? If you hadn't seen somebody for 3 years, and you hear that he died 3 years ago, it's like, well, on one hand, there's grief. On the other hand, you haven't seen him in 3 years anyway.
Right. But right. That's true.
I
Okay.
mean, I'm projecting a little because,
No, you're right. You're right.
went overseas, that was it. You weren't
You're
going to
right.
see it.
Right. No, you're right.
Okay. Tana Rabban, the rabbi saw Kol ha'omer b'parshas Kohanim, shekohen metame lehen. Anybody for whom a Kohen is not permitted to become tame. So Kohen is not permitted to become tame, but except in the case of the death of one of these 7 relatives. So for those 7 relatives, avol misabel, and those are the same relatives that you are required to practice the morning practices, the Shiva and the Shloshim. Ve'eluhein, and these are them. Ishto, wife, avivimo, parents, achi v'achoso, siblings, beno bito, children. Hosifohen, achi v'achoso, psula me'imo. And they added on 2 more. Your half brother, your brother from your mother's side only. Achoso, one second. And achoso absula me'imo, and also your half sister who is not married, so she has no husband. Vachoso nesua, and your married sister be'emi avi be'emi imo, your married half sister, whether from the father's side or the mother's side. Okay, so the basic rule is just a full sibling, and they added on half siblings with these qualifications. Just as you mourn for these relatives, also you mourn for secondary relatives, which is like your relative, your brother's brother or your son's son, or something like that. Which is, this is news to us. I don't think we practice this way. But Chachamim and the rabbi says, oh, wait a second, I missed one. Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Rabbi Shimon says, in the case of secondary relatives, it's only for your father and your grandson through your son. The other secondary relatives don't count. And
the shiva from my mother or father-in-law?
Correct. According to Rabbi Akiva, you would, but not according to the others. The third opinion, the rabbis, kosher misabel alav misabel imo. Anybody that kosher misabel alav misabel imo. Oh yeah, any relative. This seems to be the same as Rabbi Akiva, right? Any relative that you would mourn for. So let's say in the suggestion you made, your spouse, misabel imo, then you also participate in the spouse's loss. So your father-in-law, your mother-in-law, right? Which sounds like the same as Rabbi Akiva. So Chachamim Hainu Tanakama, that's what the Gemara asks. Imo babais. Difference is if you're living together, right? So we use the case of the spouse, right? So if you're separated from your spouse, then like the Chachamim, the way the last opinion phrased it is, if you would mourn with somebody, then you mourn for somebody, you mourn with them. What does with them mean? Like they're practicing Shiva, so you also practice Shiva. But what if you're living apart, right? Then that would not count. So it's more of a sympathetic mourning than a strictly required or an in principle mourning. Just as Rav and Rav Chia told their sons, when your spouse is in mourning, then when you're together with her, you should also observe the mourning practices. But if you're not together, you don't have to. Okay. Okay, and I think this is a good place to stop. Now we can go a little further. Mar Ukva Shachivle Bar Chamua, Mar Ukva's son's father-in-law, like his the son of Mar Ukva's father-in-law, so his brother-in-law, his wife's brother, passed away. So Mar Ukva was gonna sit Shiva. Al Rav Huna Lagabe Ashkechai, so Rav Huna goes to visit him, and he found him doing the morning practice. Amalei Sudanaisa by Slamecho. Is it like, what are you doing? Like you want to get all the food that they're sending over? Is that why you're practicing the morning? Lo amru lichvod ishto elachami v'chamosa. The only it's, you don't do this for your brother-in-law, you do it for a father-in-law or a mother-in-law out of respect for them, out of respect for your spouse, but not for a brother-in-law. That doesn't that's not close enough. The Tanya, Misha Meis Chami V'Chamosa, the Brisa that supports this is if your father-in-law or mother-in-law dies, you can't force your wife to put on her makeup, right? It's like a practice that is for the benefit of the husband, but she's a mourning for her parents, so you can't insist. You actually have to practice the Avelus also. You should turn over your bed and practice mourning with her. And your wife, if her father-in-law or mother-in-law, meaning your father or mother, passed away, she cannot put on makeup. She also has to practice participate in your morning practice. But we have another brisa. Even though they say that you can't make your wife break these morning practices, but they also said you can serve your husband by, you can prepare his meals, pour his cup, make his bed, wash his hands, feet, and face. So that is a counter to the morning practice, right? If you're mourning, you do these things for other people. So how is it? Like, which is it? Is she practicing mourning or not? These contradict. So it must be the two sources are talking about different cases. The case of the parents-in-law, you are required to practice mourning. In case of other in-law relatives, you are not. Shmana, that's a good proof. We have another support. Another brisa says they only said to mourn together with your wife only for the parents-in-law, but not for the other in-law relationships. Okay, let's stop here and pick up tomorrow with David.
Yeah, okay. I don't know why they're even, I mean, if your wife is sitting Shiva, she can't have relations, I mean, so why, you know what, right? I mean,
Right, but what about there's well, even if you can't sleep together, there's still the idea of you find often that practices that so that a woman wouldn't become repulsive to her husband, right?
but she's
Or
sitting Shiva, I mean, come on, I mean,
right? Yeah,
that's pretty,
yeah.
like, not
Clearly
understanding.
different sociological reality, so it's hard for me to kind of.
No, I understand, but I mean, to even think that she would be required to like,
Yeah.
to put on makeup or something like that, so she doesn't look bad while she's sitting Shiva
Yeah.
is a little much.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, like I said, different sociological
No, I
reality.
understand. I'm just making a comment. So, all right, it's good to learn.
Have a good day, everybody.
Okay,
You too. Be well.
Dan, how you doing?
All right. What's new? Anything new?
Well,
Wise, I should say.
yeah. I just got a new program. We are down 3 teachers. So I am going to be teaching math. I'm not qualified to teach math, but the other person who wasn't qualified, we never hired another math teacher. They couldn't find another math teacher. So they just had this guy who was a special ed teacher teaching it, who didn't, maybe he knew it, I don't know, but he got sick. So he's on medical leave. So I'm taking his spot. And algebra, I can't really teach it. And they just changed my program because the new semester starts tomorrow.
Right.
So, and they change all the programs. It's going to be chaos,
Yes.
just chaos.
How's attendance in the school? Student attendance?
Student attendance, I would say, is about like 80% when it should be like 95, let's just
Right.
say. And teacher attendance, I mean, it's gotten better. Teacher attendance, I think, is
Good.
back to normal. Except we have 3 teachers. They never hired a math teacher. 1 teacher never got vaccinated,
Oh,
and another teacher just got sick. So we're down, and it's only like 27 teachers in the school or something like that. So
Right.
that's 10% of the staff out. So that would be the equivalent of Clinton is like 10 teachers out, something. So that's a lot of teachers.
yeah.
So it's just really short-staffed. And the administration they're very politically correct, but they don't know what they're doing, it's just really a lot of chaos and stuff. So, but the people are nice, so it's
Well, that's
not,
what counts too.
yeah.
Are you
It's-
still considering your options for next
I am
term?
still considering my options, yeah. I might do another year, I don't know.
Well, as long as your health is good,
Yeah,
do
my
it.
health is, well, I had COVID last month, so I was out for a
Wow.
month, for a week, right before the break. But I'm feeling better now.
Good.
So
If your
Yeah.
health is good, do it because years from now, you'll say, I did the right thing.
yeah, I mean, I'm enjoying I like working with the kids still, and I think I'm doing a decent job. So it's just the getting up in the morning and just
Yeah.
the headache and part, but
Dealing with the whole thing, so to speak.
yeah, dealing with, yeah, but it's not terrible. It's not like it's not like my last year at Clinton, which was awful, but dealing with like these
Incompetence.
not more than competence. It just like people who like, yeah, I don't know. It was more that was really unpleasant. This doesn't seem to. We'll see. I'll see how the observations go and stuff like that. Right now they just have to do 2 informals, so that's not too bad.
Right. All right.
Yeah. So
I'm happy you're feeling better. That's important.
yeah, exactly.
You'll work it out. As they
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Take
All right.
care.
Be well. Good to
Bye.
talk to you.